Welcome everyone, welcome to the Swindon Spring Festival, and we hope that all is well where you are. Now we had hoped to be presenting live events in theatres, libraries and parks in May in Swindon, but that nasty little virus and the restrictions to try to contain it mean we can only have a virtual festival. In fact, today's event was meant to happen in our prize-winning library. But now it's a virtual session, which gives us a good helping of historical and local fiction. Today's guest author has written a book that is intriguingly titled Mrs. A's Indian Gentleman, which is set in our own town, Swindon. So it gives me especially great pleasure to give a Swindon Spring Festival welcome to Dawood Ali McCallum. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's a real pleasure to be with you, even if only virtually.
And I said Swindon 3 times there, and I sort of know you're based somehow in Swindon. What is your Swindon connection?
Right, well, my parents were married at Christchurch in Swindon. My mother spent the Second World War in Swindon. I have lived in Swindon and worked in Swindon since the 1970s. So, and was a regular visitor to Swindon as a child because a number of my mother's side of the family lived here. So I have a lifelong association with Swindon and 40 plus years of living here as well.
Well, in that case, it's no surprise that you have a book, and you have previous books, but this book is set in Swindon. So now let's come to the book, in which one character, Billy, or Imtiaz Khan, says the following: I think attention is going to be drawn to us, no matter what. We are 2.5 Indians walking through a town that hasn't seen a foreigner since they hanged a monkey 150 years ago, thinking it was Napoleon. Really? In Swindon? Over to you, Neil.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. I will put that quote in context in a little while and explain what Billy is talking about, why he's saying it, and it illustrates, as often happens in the book, his breathtaking lack of knowledge about history and fact. I thought rather than just my face appearing while we talk about the book, if it's okay, I'm going to do a share screen and show a series of images, which I hope will help to introduce the book. So if this all works. Excellent. Now, the book is described as a rollicking tale, a misadventure that delightfully portrays what happens when cultures collide. And I make a point of raising that at the start because I fear it can sound a bit too serious. This is a book that is a celebration of life, of relationships, of what it means to be welcomed and embraced. And I should have mentioned also in response to your question, Matt, about connections with Swindon, not only is the book set in Swindon, it's also dedicated to the town of Swindon. The story starts in 1943 with the arrival in Southampton docks of 3 men from India, 3 very different men who've come to work on the railways in the build-up to the D-Day invasion of Normandy. And they are destined to work in the Great Western Railway's works and to lodge in a house very much like those that you can see in this image, right by the railway works. It's a very strange place that they're going to be coming to. Most of the skilled younger men have volunteered, others have been called up. We're in the 4th year of the war. and a large number of jobs which were previously done by men are now done by women, and the management remains pretty dominated by stern old men, which will be one of the issues that our three heroes will have to deal with. And I'll introduce them. I confess I've been very liberal with my use of Google Images here, and so I'll give a broad copyright commitment to various organizations whose images I've downloaded and used. And I tried to find pictures that captured the personality of the three characters. So first, let me introduce you to Dr. Akaash Ray. Dr. Ray is a mathematical prodigy. He is on his way to becoming a professor at Presidency College in Kolkata. Kolkata in the early 1940s, Bengal generally, was the subject of a terrible famine where many hundreds of thousands, millions lost their lives. And it remained pretty much unknown in Britain at the time. And it was a famine which was not caused by natural effects so much as a series of decisions taken by the British rulers in that area. Akaash is a committed communist and a revolutionary, and his role, he's been called up because the Great Western Railway want to introduce an effective secret coding system for their movements of trains, and everybody who knows anything about codes seems to have disappeared. And as the chief mechanical engineer of the Swindon work says, it's probably best that none of us ask quite where they've gone or what they're doing. So he's brought over to work on creating secret communications for railway movements, again, in the build-up to the invasion. Vincent Rosario is from the other side of India, from Bombay. He's Anglo-Indian. He's the one that Billy has rather cruelly referred to as, well, half an Indian. He's a very sensitive man. He's very proud of his skills. He is one of the most brilliant movers of trains through a system anywhere in the world. Trains moving in and out of Bombay every day are moving at a phenomenal frequency and rate. And basically, the Great Western Railway has got to be able to shift thousands, hundreds of thousands of arriving American troops from docks at Cardiff, Newport, Bristol, huge amounts of material arriving, and get them to camps and down to the coast at an incredible rate without the ability to build new railway lines while still running a wartime civilian passenger service and having to deal with the fact that a significant part of the railway has been damaged by bombing. That's going to be his role. And oops, sorry about that. Our third character is the gentleman you mentioned, Imtiaz, everyone calls him Billy Khan. Billy Khan, whilst he's from India, is not actually from British India, but from one of the biggest and most powerful of the princely states, Gwalior. Gwalior state, which is the subject of my first book, is the size of France, ruled over by a Maharaja, and there were people, even throughout the 1940s, in Gwalior state, powerful people who didn't even know there was a war on. A very, in many ways, closed world. Billy is an engineer with the Gwalior State Railway, which has inherited an old engine called a Bulldog, which was built in the turn of the century, 1899, 1900. And he has kept this running very, very effectively. He's been called up because the Great Western Railway has decided to reintroduce into service a number of these old Bulldog engines, which had been committed to scrap and had been taken out of service years before, and can't afford the time or the developing of the expertise to handle these basically out-of-date machines. Billy knows and loves these engines and is delighted to have the opportunity to work on them. He's even more delighted to be running a shop in the Great Western Railway Works, which is staffed almost entirely with women. Billy is a man with love in his heart and hope in his heart, and his attempts at amorous adventures form a large part of the story, particularly his great lack of success in those adventures. And they lodge with Sally Atkinson at number 23, Ashton Street. Sally is married, her husband is away in the army, and she is struggling to deal with the debts that he has left her. He's not the nicest of men, Derek Atkinson, an abusive husband, lots of debts left behind, and the only way she can think of solving these debts is to take in the three Indian gentlemen as lodgers. And the story follows their life together as the three men from India with nothing in common, with very little liking for each other, come to terms with some of the wonders of British wartime culinary delights, including bubble and squeak, vegetarian toad in the hole, Welsh rabbit, and thanks to Sally's enthusiastic, if misplaced, belief that piccalilli will make any food Indian, lots of jars of piccalilli. The quote that you mentioned right at the start, Matt, refers to their first day going into the works. They've had a difficult first night in Swindon. They've fallen out quite magnificently among themselves. And as Vincent and Akaash prepare to go to work, they're waiting for Billy Khan to come down from his room. And he emerges in a uniform, complete with turban, much to the embarrassment and irritation of his colleagues, who make it clear that they really don't want to walk through town with him dressed like that. So I'll just read, if I may, the part which that comes from. You have a uniform? Yes, I have a uniform for formal occasions. This is it. I thought you were an engineer. I am. You look like a doorman at a posh brothel, and you'd know, would you? Look, said Vincent, much as I hate to agree with Comrade Stallion over there, I think he might have a point. Why? Said Billy huffily. Whatever happened to all that stuff about respecting our culture? Akaash shook his head and with an eloquent sigh returned to his reading. Well, think about it, said Vincent. Today's not likely to be easy for any of us, is it? There's bound to be some, I don't know, resentment? 3 foreigners marching in and telling people how to do their jobs. Who likes that? Akaash gave a mirthless chuckle. I'm sorry, but I just don't see it, said Billy stubbornly. They invited us to come here to help them. We're all in this together, standing shoulder to shoulder against a common foe and all that stuff. Why should there be any difficulties? You really don't get it, do you? Said Akaash. No, I don't. Anyway, if there are, putting on a bit of a show will help. Impress the natives, you mean? If you wanted to put it that way, yes. You sure you're not British? Billy frowned. You two are the British. I'm from Gwalior. Akaash closed his book and opened his mouth to speak, but Vincent threw up a hand. Don't even start. He turned to Billy. I just think we don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves. I think attention is going to be drawn no matter what, Billy pointed out. We're 2.5 Indians walking through a town that hasn't seen a foreigner since they hanged a monkey 150 years ago, thinking it was Napoleon. Did that really happen? Asked Akaash, fascinated. Here? In Swindon? I don't know. It happened somewhere. Probably. I'm trying to make a point here. You're determined to go dressed like that? Asked Vincent. Absolutely, said Billy. And actually, if we're talking about who wears what, I think he's the one who needs to change, he added, jerking his head towards Akaash. These are the English clothes I was issued with in Bombay, and I'm not spending good money on any more. All finished? Asked Sally, coming in from the scullery, drying her hands on her apron. Lovely to hear the three of you sounding so much at home, chattering away in your own lingo. The three of them looked at each other confused. We were speaking English. Oh. So, they go off to work. Billy realizes he's probably made a bit of a mistake with dressing as he has, but they settle in to their roles. They have various experiences and adventures. There's a particularly interesting and important night which they spend fire watching. They have a challenging meeting with a group of drunken American soldiers who did not watch the US Army's film How to Behave in Britain, and in general, learn to engage with the community and with one another, and develop relationships which move them through a difficult time and help them to make the contribution that they were invited to. The book starts, as I said, with a dedication to Swindon, a place which, as I describe in the dedication, welcomes, embraces, adopts, adapts, and survives. And I started writing this book around about the time that the announcement was made about the Honda factory closing. And a very wise person was being interviewed in the town centre, and she said, well, we survived the railway works closing, we'll survive this too. And I think that that thought is particularly relevant as we are in lockdown and celebrating the Spring Festival virtually. And I think that the book has a particular relevance at this time because it is about people coming together. People don't need to be friends, but kindness is the key to survival, certainly in my story, and I think in life generally. So with thanks to Swindon, with thanks to Swindon Central Library, where I did a great deal of research from their wonderful resources on the railway works, to my wonderful publisher, Hatchet India, who have done a beautiful job of physically creating this book. And I hope that the writing is as good as the physical beauty of the thing. And of course, to the Swindon Spring Festival for the opportunity to talk about it. I would be more than happy to answer any questions or to expand on anything that I've said or to focus on any other part of the book, if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much. That's good. Hey, thank you very much, Dawood Ali, or Neil, as I know you. I mean, that's fascinating, and I've got so many questions, but let's just see where we go. The first thing I'd love to try to make clear on behalf of myself and other festival followers, and somebody's already asked me this question, is it fact or fiction? In other words, was there an Akaash, was there a Vincent, was there an Imtiaz, or are they all, and those pictures you showed us? Now I'm really even more uncertain. Clarify, please.
Okay, by all means. Well, I suppose in a way the answer is there were hundreds of thousands of Akaashes and Vincents and Billys who served through the Second World War in all sorts of different ways. I would say, in answer to the question, is this fact or fiction? It's a bit of a glib answer, but it's faction. There is a thing that's cinema does now, where some films, they say, this is based on a true story. And others say, this is based on real events. I'm going to say, this is based on real events. Those people didn't exist, but the scenes that I've described, particularly at Swindon railway station, I have seen, so I've conflated some things from different times. I've played around with history a little bit, but I think that what's really important is that the book captures a sense of place, time, attitudes, and relationships. And in addition to Swindon, I dedicated this book to my mother, who I mentioned served in Swindon, was in Swindon during the war. She was in the Land Army. She did her time fire watching. And she read the book, and I was quite nervous about that because I have to say, she's a pretty hard critic of mine and is not very patient with my writing generally. And I said, what do you think? And she said, gave me a sleepless night, gave me several sleepless nights. I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Why? She said, it was like being back there. It was too real. And whatever other comments I get on the book, that's probably for me the single most important one. So I'm going to say it's faction. These people did not exist. And I, as I've said, I've been very hungrily searching Google Images for the faces that I think capture the characters that they are. But I'm afraid they only exist in the book.
Yeah, well, it certainly captures the period. I mean, it's just amazing. And because of my age, I know a bit of that time, and I've read a lot about it. So it's absolutely brilliant. So that's a really important point to clarify. So those three men that you showed us pictures of with their names beside them, who looked the part, by the way, you're you know, the guy with the glasses is the kind of doctor, the handsome Billy, who's a bit of a womanizer. It looks like he might be. So won't those men sue you, or are they dead, or who are they?
I've spoken to my lawyer, and all legal action will be taken against the Spring Festival, so I have no worries whatsoever. I'm pretty confident they're at least two of them are no longer with us, and I hope the third would be flattered if he ever found out that his picture had been used.
And the same goes for Mrs. Atkinson then as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's nice and clear. Then the next question I have is, in part you have already answered it, but I'd love you to expand a little bit on it. Why you wrote this story, and many writers say, I think we should call this fiction, and many writers say they write fiction in order to get closer to the truth. You know, because just giving very accurate, so-called accurate details, for a start, you can't be sure they're accurate because you're just taking them from written records. And even though both you and I like writing, we know that many things are spoken and disappear like smoke in the wind. Many things happen and disappear. And quite often when one only goes to written records, one is only getting a certain version of history. So I really like the writers who write fiction about a particular period. I find great accuracy and great truth in it. But why did you do it? I mean, you answered a question earlier about your connection with Swindon. You weren't living here at the time, were you? In the 40s? No. No. You're far too young for that anyway.
Thank you. That took a moment there, didn't it, Matt? But yes. No, I wasn't. I wanted to capture the sense of a place in terms of how I see it. And the whole thing about these engines, bulldogs, that is actually historically accurate. These engines were brought out of retirement and repaired and run. But I wanted to capture what it would be like and what Swindon would be like at that time, because I think that whilst everywhere has changed dramatically over 75 years, few places, certainly in Britain, will have changed more dramatically than Swindon has. I wanted, and the easiest way to do that always is to introduce people from outside a community into a community so the reader can see the community for the first time through the eyes of those protagonists. But I also wanted to capture different ideas of Indianness and aspects about India as it existed before independence. So that's what motivated me to do it, and to have a common theme of their working together in Swindon was the way I felt would be the best way to do it.
Well, I know your writing and know you to be a serious writer, and here you are. You've written a rollicking tale about something that one could get quite serious about. Racism, as we call it now. The word didn't exist then, not in the context it does today. But these guys could have felt quite uncomfortable with some cocky Swindonian lads looking at their skin color and hearing their accents and so on. But you have a light touch throughout the book. Did you deliberately decide to steer away from the more unpleasant sides of racism?
I think I wanted to, I mean, there is with the American soldiers, a fairly extreme.
Your sound has gone, Neil. Have you touched a button or something?
No.
Oh, that's better. Sorry.
That was me being reflective. Right, I'm sorry about that. And there is an extreme racist attack from these white American soldiers, and I've wanted to, as I've done in this book, to contrast the nature of British racism, a kind of unconscious cruelty, compared to the vicious nature of the racism that was evident, particularly between white and black American GIs here during the Second World War. And it's a subject that I've done a fair amount of research on, because it's something that I've been thinking about writing about for some time. And it is fascinating how throughout the West Country, towns were racially segregated. Throughout Wiltshire, villages were earmarked white or black, despite the fact that the entire local population virtually would have been white, that only black American troops could be posted here. Only white American troops could be posted there. And it's a fascinating thing. I think I've probably been very generous to attitudes in Swindon around race, but that was quite a deliberate choice. And I'm glad that you feel I've dealt with difficult issues with a light touch, because that was exactly my aim, to raise these things, but try and avoid becoming too preachy about them.
Terrific. I mean, and that sort of leads me to my next and sort of final question, really, unfortunately, because of time constraints. So there you are with this light touch, with this historical setting that is very much from the past. Who did you imagine is going to be your reader? What kind of person?
Gosh, that's a very good question.
Because we want this book to sell, and we want it to be borrowed from the library and bought from Waterstones when they reopen, or bought online. So I'm imagining we have viewers who are thinking, now, there's a whole lot of books at this festival. Which 10 will I order? Why will they order yours?
Right. Because it's, I think, because it's funny, because it's fun, because it celebrates the best of what is in people, no matter what ethnicity or class. And it celebrates kindness among people. It's and also it's a cracking story. I've been surprised that in India, where it's published, it's been very popular so far among young readers, which I didn't really expect. But I'm delighted that that's the case. So I think it's for everybody, really. But I would say that, wouldn't I?
No, you would, and why not? And I think that's the answer I would have given had you asked me. I think it can be read by someone who has nothing to do with Swindon and is interested in a particular period, or is just interested in a good story, but also terrific interest to Swindonians. I think they'll feel a very particular something about it in the bits that I've read anyway. So I would urge Swindonians, check out this book, Mrs. A's Indian Gentleman. Check it out. We have to come to the end. I wonder if you would say a few last words and hold it up, because I just like to see the cover again. And the way our recording is working, if you don't speak, then it will be on me and we won't see the cover. So I want people to see the cover again. I think it's terrific.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, it has been a joy to write this book and to get it published. And the editorial team I worked with in India on it, I discovered are all in their early 20s, absolutely, utterly brilliant, a joy to work with. But it was also fascinating, the questions they asked, because I've used a lot of very English expressions, like, as the actress said to the bishop, and trying to explain to a highly educated 20-something Indian why, as the actress said to the bishop, is funny, was probably the biggest challenge in the writing of the whole book. So they've done a wonderful job. It's a thing of beauty. And I hope the writing is as good as the book. And I believe it is.
And where can people get it?
Swindon Central Library will be selling copies.
Under present circumstances, bearing in mind all these places are closed, where can they get it? Now it's May.
Right. If you go on to Goodreads or any site like that, type in the title. It's available as an ebook from Amazon and also from Amazon India as a hard copy.
Dawood Ali McCallum, thank you very much for telling us about Mrs. A's Indian Gentleman. And I love the fact that it's set in Swindon. Thank you very much. Until we meet again, all of you who are watching, keep well. Most of all, a Swindon Spring Festival thanks to Dawood Ali McCallum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bye for now. Thank you for watching this virtual session at the Swindon Spring Festival of Literature and the Arts 2020. We do hope you enjoyed it. And we also hope that you will join us for the rest of this virtual festival. Here for you are details of the author you have just watched, their book, and our online information. Thank you very much for joining us, and keep well till we meet again.